My name is Kevin Moffitt. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Accounting and Information Systems in the Rutgers Business School. Thank you for listening to my presentation that I call a primer on text analytics for accountants. I hope you will find this presentation valuable. To begin this presentation, let's listen to some graphic 911 calls. If your 2-year-old is in your lap and you need some time to put them in the other room to play the iPad, go ahead and pause the presentation now. The first call that you're going to listen to is from the boyfriend of a girl who fell from a hotel room. Let's listen in.
No emergency?
My girlfriend just jumped off the balcony of our hotel room.
Okay, is she suicidal?
I don't know. He was...
Okay, stay on the line with me for the paramedics. You stay on the phone, okay? What room number are you in?
Oh my God, I don't even know what number.
You're 8701 World Center Drive? Orange County with a transfer.
Hello? Oh my God.
What's the address you need help with?
God damn it, my girlfriend just jumped off.
What's the address, sir?
It's a World Marriott.
Okay. What's going on, sir?
I don't know. She was leaning over the side, and I walked inside, and I hear, and then, God, you got to have a gun now, sir. I don't understand.
Leaning over the side of what?
Do you think this caller was telling the truth? Do you think he would make a good candidate for your own daughter's boyfriend? Let's hear another call. This time a man calls 911 because he says his wife fell asleep face down in a bathtub and died.
911, what's the emergency? My wife fell asleep in the bathtub and I think she's dead. What's the address? 5250 Crested Owl Court, Morrow, Ohio. Okay, you need to calm down for me. I can't understand the address. What was it? 5250 Crested Owl Court. 5250 Crested Owl in Hamilton Township? Yes, Morrow, Ohio. What's going on? She fell asleep in the bathtub. I think I was downstairs. I just came up here and she was laying face down in the bathtub. In the water? Yes. How old is she? She's 24.
So that sounded suspicious. He thinks she fell asleep and he thinks she's dead, but he's going to have the police come over just to make sure. So let's listen to caller number 3, find out what his story is.
And what's going on? In the parking lot, the sports editor, Kent, laying on the ground. Pool of blood. Looks like he's been shot or something.
Okay, he's on the parking lot behind the Tribune on the KFC side?
Yes.
Who did you see in the area?
I saw 2 guys in the area.
Were they white or black?
White. I'd say 19, 20.
What were they wearing?
I don't know. This gal, she saw them. She walked out to smoke a cigarette, saw them duck down behind the car.
Okay.
I looked out and saw them, and I said, what's going on? I knew it was Kent's car, and I said, Kent, and they didn't look up. Nobody did anything. Somebody's been hurt, man.
Okay, so you saw them duck down behind his car?
Yes.
Okay. So why did I have you listen to these 911 calls? Well, I think that what you'll see is they illustrate how text mining can be used in accounting research and accounting applications. So let's go on and talk about an exploratory study that was conducted by an Ohio lieutenant police officer named Tracy Harpster. And the name of the study was Analyzing 911 Homicide Calls for Indicators of Guilt or Innocence, and it was published in 2009 in a journal called Homicide Studies. In this study, transcripts of 911 calls, like the ones you just heard, were manually tagged, manually coded by researchers to identify the presence of specific verbal cues. The purpose of the study was to determine the differences between guilty and innocent 911 callers who reported a murder. The guilty callers were deceptive in this sample because they were always posing as innocent people. So they would lie about not committing the murder. This study identified several indicators of guilt. These are things that the guilty callers did and the innocent callers didn't do as much of. And so they identified including extraneous information. Guilty callers were inappropriately polite. They were trying to get in with the good graces of the 911 operator. They didn't ask for help as much as the innocent callers, and they were evasive. So my colleague and I were wondering if we could replicate this study by doing an automated analysis of transcripts. So basically take the same approach of dividing 911 calls into two sets. One set are those guilty callers who pretended to be innocent and reported a murder, and those innocent callers who reported a murder. And see if we can use automated techniques to look for cues in the transcripts and discriminate between guilty and innocent callers. So we used a tool called Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count, which is basically a general purpose set of dictionaries, and I'll go into what dictionaries are later. Basically, they're groups of words. And we use this tool to look for the cues that would discriminate between guilty and innocent callers. So this is what we found. Truth tellers, or the innocent callers, display much more negative emotion than deceptive callers. So innocent callers were not worried about maybe rubbing the 911 caller the wrong way. They were just in shock, in pain, and used terms that sort of fit the situation. They also would refer to singular others, she or he. They would talk about individuals and not groups of people. There were more numbers found in their transcripts. So whether that's an address or a phone number, they were quick to provide and provided often this important information to the 911 operators. And then they also used more generic names of locations, such as apartment or garage, and to help give accurate and helpful information to responders. These were called leisure terms under the tool we used. Deceivers, on the other hand, would use third-person pronouns. So this is a way of distancing yourself from what's being said or from the actions that took place. So if you say they, or they also tried to share a blame. So when they were talking about themselves, they'd say we instead of me. So they didn't want to put themselves right in the situation. They would use more negation terms and assent words. So what does this mean? They would say yes, no, and cut off the rest of the dialogue. So they weren't detailed answers to a lot of the questions, just simple yeses and nos. And then they would also tell the operator to wait or hold more often. There was a caller that was asked to do CPR on the victim, and they're just like, wait, no, hold on. That's gross. They're already dead. Why would I do CPR? So these were the distinguishing factors between innocent callers and guilty callers. So we compiled this list of 11 things to do or not to do when calling 911 to report a homicide. These were the things that we found interesting that guilty people did that innocent people didn't do. So this is not an endorsement, or this is not to give ideas on how to avoid detection in the future. So take this in the context of research. So 911 calls are perhaps the most convenient type of data for doing this type of research, that is discriminating between truth tellers and deceivers. Just the context lends itself to this exercise. For example, 911 calls are unscripted conversations. So you're getting something completely random, basically, from the 911 call. The caller can't plan for every question that's going to be asked, and they've probably never been in this type of situation before. So what you're getting is going to be, it's not going to be doctored up, you could say. The calls are extremely high stakes, so there's a lot of personal investment. And if there's, for example, nothing at stake, then someone who would normally tell the truth wouldn't care if they lied, and someone who lied wouldn't care if they told the truth. So the high stakes are important. It's very emotionally charged, so those who are innocent and those who are guilty should have completely different emotions going in. So they should be, what they say should be affected by how they feel. And of course, innocent and guilty, whether if you committed murder or not, is going to change quite a bit how you feel. So it should be reflected in what you say in these 911 calls. So it turns out our findings were really similar to what were found in the manual analysis of the 911 call, which is what gets us so excited about this type of research. Why I'm excited to take this type of research and try to apply it to the accounting domain. So only slightly less nefarious than those who lie during 911 homicide calls are those C-level executives who lie during quarterly conference calls to analysts. So what question do I want to ask here? Are there linguistic differences between CEO responses to questions from analysts? So the CEOs are divided into two groups, just like the 911 callers are divided into two groups. There are CEOs who are in charge of companies that restate their earnings, and then there are those CEOs who are in charge of companies who do not restate their earnings. So those CEOs who gave a conference call to these analysts and ended up restating their earnings for that quarter are put into one group, and the CEOs who didn't, whose company didn't restate their earnings for that quarter are the other group. So we have this matched sample of basically, innocent and guilty CEOs in a sense, because one set of CEOs obviously didn't provide enough information to the analysts and had to restate their earnings for that quarter. So the implication is that these CEOs who are guilty had to hide the true health of their company through deceit, obfuscation, or other maneuvers. So the overall hypothesis in this study was my idea that what we had thought of in the past was that when people lie, they're under they have higher cognitive load. That is, there's more going on in their mind. There's more processes in their mind. They're being used up because they're having to think of lies, think of ways to deceive the person they're talking to. So one way these deception can be related, or it can be one of the byproducts of this cognitive load, is more ums, ers, uhs. So deceivers should be like thinking about what they're going to lie about. So those CEOs who didn't restate would be have more fluent speech, and my thought was I could discriminate between the CEOs in this way. So let's do an exercise. Let's take a listen to the couple samples. I want you to think which of these two CEOs restated their earnings. So let's play this audio. We'll follow, this is a transcript, a part of the audio, so 3 paragraphs. And the way that this audio works is there's someone asking questions, but that's been taken out. I'm just looking at the transcripts of what the CEO said. And this comes after the first 10 minutes, which is just a statement, a presentation by the company, and we're in the Q&A session now. So these are the first 5 minutes of the Q&A. So we won't listen to the full 5 minutes for each CEO, just of course. There's CEO number 1.
Good morning. We're pleased with the progress we made during our third quarter. We positioned our company well before the quarter to concentrate on certain vital initiatives that would both fix some problem areas and lay the groundwork for restoring us to high-quality growth. Fred, in addition to the procurement of new people, we promoted a number of qualified people here recently. We've spent a lot of time on retention, making sure we don't lose important people as well. We restore this business. We've gone, in some cases, to a flatter organizational structure where we can make decisions a lot quicker. As Joe mentioned, we put the sleepwear under our baby leadership, which is a super competent team. So I think overall we've looked at this at the macro level as well, not just filling in some key spots. In research, which we had not done, and we've invested in understanding each of these brands more, and we've done the stacks research, completed that on finding the optimum price and margin thresholds for every core product under our brands. We've begun online consumer surveys. We're doing consumer panels on every one of our product lines, and you can't understate the importance. We put $20 million into upgrading our core products as we move into 08. So it's far beyond just a people issue. insufficient inventory cost us a hell of a lot of grief, and that's going to pay its way. And as we move through the next couple of years, having a senior executive over planning and allocations, we'll get a lot better, not only having the proper level of inventory, but the proper mix, and that will materially improve profitability. So I don't think investments, we don't have a lack of investments. Let's put it that way.
Great. And thanks, Mary Ellen, and good morning, everyone. We're very pleased to report a strong quarterly results. We generated 57 cents per diluted share in FFO for the quarter, exceeding analyst consensus estimate of 54 cents and equating to a 16.3% increase in FFO per share year over year. John, this is Rand. Obviously there are other people talking about coming into the market. There are others that have taken land positions. That's going to happen as markets mature. We do think we have the best sites in the marketplace, particularly that can service the major customers, both existing customers at Fort Meade and the new ones coming in from BRAC. And we've got the lowest cost basis, and we're ahead of the others in terms of development underway. So, we understand there will be competition out there. We're the dominant player in that marketplace, and we intend to stay that way and be very aggressive in terms of maintaining our market share.
Okay, in an exercise like this, it is difficult to determine which company restated their earnings. I took transcripts of a matched sample of companies to detect these differences in how much they used disfluencies in their speech, the ums, ers, and ahs, to see if that could help me discriminate between the two, and it did. If you look at the second bullet point, those CEOs that did not restate their earnings, so we'll say they come from truthful companies, they actually had more disfluencies. They had more ums, ers, ahs, repeated words, like they say the, or we are going to. So I had significant results in the opposite direction that I predicted. Now, why would this be? Well, there's this idea of a burden of truth. So if someone is going to be truthful and they're asked difficult questions and they're trying to be as exact as possible, then they need to think through their answers on the fly, and they might have more disfluencies as a result. Deceivers, on the other hand, have rehearsed what they're going to say. So when a question comes up related to a talking point they've prepared, it's just a matter of spitting out what they've already prepared. So that's one idea behind what might be going on here. Now, other measures we looked at were the cohesiveness of the text. So cohesiveness has to do with, are adjacent sentences and paragraphs conceptually similar? In other words, is there one topic that's being developed over time, cross sentences, or are they saying one sentence about one thing and then another sentence about another thing without any cohesiveness between what they're saying? And restaters had less cohesiveness. So does this mean they're jumping around from topic to topic? Is that a result of a lot of different questions being asked? Or in one question, what we're seeing is that in one question within one paragraph, cross sentences, the cohesiveness measures show that restaters are not cohesive. So I want to compare this study that I just described to another study in which we looked at spontaneous interviews. Okay, spontaneous interviews, we had these students come in and we just asked them a series of questions. They had no time to prepare. They were unfamiliar with what questions would be asked. It's different than the quarterly analyst calls. Okay, you know they're coming. They come every quarter. You have talking points prepared. You know you're an expert in the domain that you're talking about. So very different from a spontaneous type interview. So you need to consider these type of factors when you're analyzing text. So in a sense, when deceivers are stuck in these spontaneous interview studies, they've been found to speak less. They don't say as much as truth tellers. Truth tellers say more. But when we look at data sets where there's time to prepare, you can sit down and compose an email, you can sit down and compose a text, the deceivers have lengthier responses than the truth tellers. So they're putting more effort into convincing the reader that they're being honest, and when they're trying to simulate honesty, then they end up putting more text, than putting more down on paper than the truth tellers. Now, what about the 911 calls versus the quarterly analyst calls? Well, the 911 calls were great. We used the differences, the linguistic differences, to classify those 911 calls with 90% accuracy. So if you can do the same thing with quarterly analyst calls, then that's a great tool for investors and for auditors. So so what can we say about the similarities and differences between the two sets of data? Well, the 911 calls describe the gory scenes, sometimes by the guilty people themselves. The quarterly analyst calls are responses to questions about the company's health, strategy, and future outlook. The 911 calls are emotionally charged and are in response to a horrific event and are spontaneous in their nature. They occur almost immediately after the fact, and callers expect to be immediately in contact with authorities, if not confronted by them. Analyst calls, on the other hand, begin with a prepared statement. CEOs are often asked about typical business events. And while analysts can be confrontational, they are not law enforcement. But while different, both sets of data share similarities. For instance, each has a measure of spontaneity. CEOs' responses to questions are off the cuff, can be off the cuff, just as 911 callers' responses are. Each are part of an interview process, and each can be very high stakes. Now, you may think it's silly to compare 911 calls to quarterly conference calls, but analyzing the context in this way is what must be done in textual analysis if we want to understand the effects of contextual factors on verbal expression. Within the area of law enforcement, the opposite of a 911 call in terms of contextual similarity might be written statements by victims, witnesses, or suspects put together with the help of a lawyer. Lawyers are careful to craft statements that move their clients away from suspicion of guilt, or at least nothing damning should be included in such statements. Similarly, when you compare quarterly analyst calls to an MD&A, for example, the text included in annual reports is much different than CEO responses to interview questions. The MD&A, for example, could have passed through many hands and have been seen by a countless number of eyes before being published. If a fraudulent company creates an MD&A, then they should be as careful as possible to appear legitimate in all of their business practices. Yet, despite the best care taken to hide their tracks, it is reasonable to assume that even in statements prepared by a committee, there will be differences in the text between MD&As from fraudulent and non-fraudulent companies, simply because the approach to writing the MD&A is different. Consider that a fraudulent company is writing with the goal to present facts and misinformation in such a way as to appear as a normal, law-abiding institution. Non-fraudulent companies, on the other hand, have no such concerns and are simply presenting information in its true light. Even though each type of company is trying to achieve the same outcome, that is, being perceived as a law-abiding organization, the approach is different, leading researchers to believe that these differences can be detected. This leads to another interesting study in which a matched sample of MD&As from 101 fraudulent companies and 101 non-fraudulent companies was analyzed in an exploratory study to identify the most common phrases found in each class of MD&A. When we were looking at these phrases, we mirrored a methodology used in the linguistics literature called lexical bundle analysis. So what lexical bundle analysis does is it looks at the top phrases found in a corpus of text. So first, all the top phrases are identified, and those are the ones that occur at least 20 times per million words in a corpus. So in this study, it was comparing the lexical bundles found in history journals and the lexical bundles found in biology journals. The bundles with stars next to them occur in both corpora, which means the bundles without stars don't even qualify as lexical bundles in the other corpus. So let's see, the number one bundle for history journals at the same time. It is interesting to think of because time and history go hand in hand, so that's the top bundle. And it occurs 144 times per million words in history journals. So let's look down the list and see if it's in the top 20 bundles in biology journals. No, it's not in the top 20. So the second top bundle in history journals, the end of the, is another bundle where it has a temporal word in it, end. And that's fitting, of course, because it's in a history journal. Now that's the fifth most common bundle in biology journals. So maybe in biology journals talking about the end of the sternum. I don't know. So, but several of these bundles don't even appear in the other corpus. So there's a definite difference in this level of analysis between the two corpora and the types of phrases that are found there. So I was looking to see if there were different phrases found in fraudulent, non-fraudulent MD&As. And you can see that these bundles are all 4 words long. So that's what you'll see in my lexical bundle analysis of fraudulent, non-fraudulent MD&As. So let's look at the first line here. Was primarily due to. Occurred 205 times per million words in the fraudulent MD&As. 268 times per million words in the non-fraudulent MD&As. So you might say there's some difference, but I don't have any reason to. Maybe some of you do. I haven't assigned that to say, this definitely indicates fraud or not, because they use this phrase. Now, the second phrase is highlighted because it's actually a smaller part of a larger phrase. So if you see process, research and development, and the fourth phrase, in process, research and the third to last phrase, research and development expenses. So the whole phrase is in process, research and development expenses. So they really belong together as a 6-word phrase. And there were the first two, process, research and development, and in process, research and, there were big differences between the fraud companies and non-fraud companies. It looks like they were used almost 3 times as much in fraudulent companies. So that is an absolute sign of a phrase that's used more often by fraudulent companies than non-fraudulent companies. In the fourth quarter in the United States, so there are literally hundreds of words, hundreds of phrases that I analyzed. Now, if you look at the top phrases here and the frequency per million, so you can see here the top phrase was in history journals was used 144 times per million words. And then in the biology journal, it's 111 times per million words. And then it drops quite a bit after 5 or so, it gets halved, and then it drops slower after that. When you look at the lexical bundles in the MD&As, and look how many times they're used, 205 times per million words. And everything here, almost all of them, are more common than even the top lexical bundle. So what does this mean? The top lexical bundle in the history or biology journal. What does this mean? It means that in the MD&As, phrases are recycled a lot more than in academic journals. And academic journals are pretty formulaic when you talk about composed compositions of text. If you compare an academic journal to fiction or to newspaper articles, academic journals are much more formulaic. And MD&As and financial statements are much more formulaic than academic journals. But then again, to be fair, the topic is always the same. There's topics relatively similar across MD&As, discussing the health of the company, competition, future outlook, risks. So just thought that was an interesting note. So here are some lexical bundles that might have some interesting meanings between fraud and non-fraud companies. So we look at in-process research and development, and goodwill and other intangible assets. Could indicate creative acquisition accounting. And fraudulent companies use these phrases at a higher rate, especially the in-process research and development, than the non-fraud companies. Then there's the bundle disposition of long-lived assets. It's not used as much as in-process research and development, but this is a way to manipulate earnings and improve your cost and expense structure for the future. And it's completely legitimate if used in the proper context, but it can be misused, and therefore, in the fraudulent companies, this term appears more often. Fair value accounting. It's subjective, and it is something that's used and seen more with fraudulent companies. 50% more in fraudulent companies. And then foreign currency exchange adjustments are mentioned twice as much in fraudulent companies than non-fraudulent companies. So these are indicators, and not hard evidence, but indicators that if you have enough of these types of phrases for a company, then you might want to become more suspicious when performing your audit. So what are the types of data that have been looked at and still need to be looked at for textual analyses in the accounting domain? We have the annual statements, including and quarterly financial statements, proxy statements, president's letters to shareholders, internal emails, if possible, press releases, news articles, and social sites, such as blogs that are maintained by the company or maintained by individual employees, Facebook profiles, and LinkedIn profiles. So when you're analyzing documents, the level of analysis can occur at the individual word level, at the phrase level, at the sentence level, paragraph level, or the document level. So what does this mean? For example, at the word level, sometimes researchers just want to know, or investigators want to know, how many times a particular word occurs in the text. For example, you might want to count the number of times the word invest is mentioned in a document. But counting the times the word invest occurs in a document doesn't accurately portray the perhaps what you're looking for. For example, there are permutations of the word invest that you might want to count. So what if you counted all times the word invest, regardless of what came after it? So invest, then you might count investment, invests, investor. Then you might capture words you don't intend to, like investigate. Also, are we interested in synonymous words? You know, if we say invest means you want to make money, okay? So some of these words might be synonymous with that. Advance, back, endow, entrust, provide, put up dough, lend, loan, etc. So maybe you want to count those words too to come up with the total number of times that the word invest, as you mean it, occurs in a document. So when you're doing this analysis by using synonyms, what you can do is combine all the similar words into one set. Those are called dictionaries or lexicons. So these dictionary-based analysis combine words that are synonymous, and then they give the dictionary name. So maybe we'll call it the Make Money Dictionary. So we're going to count the word invest. And invest with a star means any invest plus any word that contains the word invest in it. So investment, investor. They would even count investigate in this sense. So you have all these words, and you might even decide to include words like schemes, steal, scheme is on there twice, and cheat. So these could all be part of the Make Money Dictionary. So at the end of the day, if invest occurs 5 times, advance occurs 10 times, back 3 times, so we're up to 18. So say that's it. You know, make money gets a score of 18. So make money appeared 18 times in the document, and that's how dictionary-based analysis works. Now there are some dictionaries that have been made for doing accounting research. Okay, let's go ahead and listen to the second CEO. Remember, one of these CEOs actually came from a company that restated earnings for that quarter. And you're supposed to try and figure out which it was. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. I hope this gave you a few ways to think about text analytics.